Hello, Om Shanti, and welcome to today's masterclass, one of 21 masterclasses in new consciousness, new ways of thinking, being and doing in today's challenging times. My name is Philippa, and I'll be with you throughout this series as together we listen to the experience of yogis and meditators from countries right around the world, from all backgrounds and from all walks of life, as they share with us their navigational tools for coping with this rapidly changing world that we now live in. Now, one of the things about recent times and what people have been going through in countries right around the world is that two things have been going on. On the one hand, we've seen increased levels of fear around what may happen to me, what may happen to loved ones, what may happen to my own job security, where I live. So many reasons for fear to increase in our hearts. But at the same time, there has been an increase in what we have been experiencing and how much love we have been feeling. Because we've not necessarily been able to see our friends and relatives, we've missed them and perhaps realized how much we love them. So it feels like there's a whole wave of love that has been going around at the same time as this wave of fear. And how do you move from one vibration of fear, which perhaps brings you down into a more negative state, into the vibration of love, which raises you up and puts you in a higher vibrational state? So moving from fear to love is the theme of our masterclass today. Now, all of our speakers are both teachers and students of the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University. It's a place for understanding and really diving deeply into who am I and the self and really understanding my own way of being. The subject taught is Raja Yoga meditation. It's the yoga of the mind. And there are teaching and meditation centres in over 110 countries around the world, and there's an active presence in even more countries than that, so really a worldwide presence. And the university has a range of activities, apart from teaching and offering a place for people to come and experience meditation. They have a presence at the United Nations, and they get involved in grassroots levels, working with tribal communities in Rajasthan, for instance, and helping out in times of disaster. It's an organisation that was founded in India in 1936 through a series of teachings and visions that came through the original founder, Brahma Baba. And the teachings that he received were very much aimed at helping humanity through this transitional phase that we appear to be going through right at this time. So it feels very relevant for today's world. And the founder decided quite early on that it was important that women should be put in front, making the Brahma Kumaris now the largest organisation of its kind in the world to be led by women. Well, we have one of those women with us today. She's Mahoney, who has spent her career in the performing arts, training initially as an actor at the National Institute of Dramatic Art in Sydney, in Australia, where she's from. And after this, she worked for many years in theatre, in TV and film, doing both classical as well as innovative productions. She then found herself drawn to the field of conflict resolution, and she actually studied for a master's degree in this subject, after which she worked as a consultant for both individuals and organisations, helping bring harmony to difficult situations and destructive behaviours, as well as encouraging creative potential to flourish. More recently, she has collaborated with two musicians to create an inspired collection of spoken meditation commentaries with especially composed music for meditation. And Chrissy has also been a student and teacher of the Brahma Kumaris now for more than 35 years, based in Melbourne, and she joins us from Melbourne now. Chrissy, welcome to Masterclasses. It's really great to have your input into this series. Now, you've spent your adult life working in a number of different settings, but you've always had a keen interest on trying to work out what it is to be human, what makes us tick, what makes us who we are. And we really are seeing humanity in a new light at the moment, with this fear that's going around as well as this wave of love that's going around. So very much two extremes of emotion. How do you see this relationship of fear and love? How do they work off each other, would you say?
Well, it's a little bit like the law of life, there's night and day, there's yin and yang, there's good and bad, there's love, there's fear, there's the opposites, and I think it's they need to work hand in hand. It's just whether or not we're talking about terror or fear. I think there's unknown fears and known fears, and fear is an opportunity. I think we tend to want to shrink from it or run from it or be overwhelmed by it, but I think it's an opportunity, and I think we are in a time now that is providing a smorgasbord, a great palette of opportunities for us to choose from. And we can choose fear, or we can choose love. And they're both, it's like they're two extremes, and there must be a middle ground as well. But I think fear is very contagious, and it taints us through the media, through news, through conversations, through the what ifs and the uncertainties. That this is one of this particular event that we're finding ourselves in has a lot of unpredictable, uncertain aspects to it that really rattle us and create an instability, because we like to know and we like to have a sense of direction and purpose. So I think that's one of the big challenges we're having.
For a lot of people, they would put fear and the opposite of that as being love and hate. It's very interesting because a lot of people would put love and hate as being the opposite emotions. Why put fear rather than hate? What would the difference of that opposite give?
Well, they're words in a way, really. We put words to human emotions so that we can try and understand them. But sometimes I hear people say, "Oh, I hate what's going on. I hate this situation. I hate being home all the time." So they are using that word hate, but it's a negative emotion, and it's whatever label we want to put on it. It takes us down, and some people are angry about it. Some people are angry that some people are working and I'm not, and we have to have such empathy with our feelings and the feelings of other people, and not really wanting it to be other than what it is. This has come to us for a reason, and so it's a very low frequency. Hate, anger, fear. We're functioning on a very low frequency, and for some people, perhaps they're comfortable with that, and they don't want to think about other possibilities. I think if you're suffering and you're thinking, I'm just not enjoying the worries that I'm having or the fear that I'm having, it's a sure indication that you have the capacity to convert this into something much more significant, much more sacred, much more healing, much more nourishing. It's possible. If you can't imagine something that you don't already know, you don't already have inside yourself. So something's calling. Something is calling us to raise the consciousness and look at this in a much different way.
Well, we'll talk in a moment a bit more about this vibration, this consciousness of love and how to move into that. But I'm curious to hear a little about your story, because you began your career working as an actor. And, I think for many actors, their work is a form of self-discovery, that they're learning about themselves by playing the different parts that they play. And for a lot of actors, that's their path and that's what they do. But for you, you still were left with a sense of inquiring and looking for something more. What do you think, looking back, you were looking for, and how did you find it?
I suppose I've always been drawn, even since a small child, into the ancient aspect or the nature of human beings, of the human species. I've always been drawn to the elders, the older ones that had stories and insights. I love to be in their company, even as a small child, and so I was really always drawn to human stories. I think when we know each other's story, then we have more empathy, more understanding, more insight into the person that perhaps I've not liked very much, perhaps I've hated, perhaps has been the enemy. So when I understand their story, when I inquire, or someone tells you some insight about that person, you go, oh, now I understand, and it broadens that that relationship or the feeling towards the other. And so I was always curious about this as a child, about the ancient aspect of ourselves and myself. What was this sort of inner story that was trying to speak to me in myself, even as a child? And you know, understanding why we are like we are. I've always been fascinated by that and wanted to learn more about it. And so I thought by going into the acting profession, I could help people understand each other and themselves much more. So that's why in my acting, I always felt I was going more into the depths of the being, the human spirit, rather than representing what people do. It was always a kind of like an excavation, like being an archaeologist of the soul, even as a sort of a young person, and to represent that with integrity.
And then, of course, at quite a young age, you came across the Brahma Kumaris and started to learn meditation. How did that change how you saw yourself and the kind of contribution that you wanted to make through your work?
Well, I suppose, as I said, I was always interested in the essence of who we are and what makes us who we are. I remember just to deviate slightly, as a small child, when my parents had a party, we had a slatted door, and I used to like to stand before coming into the room to say hello to everyone and greet the guests. I used to like to stand behind this door and kind of spy on them, really. It's a strange thing to do, but I liked to see what people were like when they thought no one was looking at them. And it always fascinated me that that people were one thing when they were speaking to other people, or when they were displaying an image that they had of themselves, and when they thought no one was watching or they were no longer in conversation, I saw something else pass through them. Something in their eyes, something in their behaviour, and I thought, gosh, they're different people. And so I was always wanting to understand that. And so when I went on this pilgrimage, I suppose, to go deeper and to understand myself through the process of meditation, in order to help humanity and enrich my work. Through this understanding of the human soul, the spirit, when I started doing the course in Raja Yoga, it was all about, the first lesson was, who am I? I'm a soul, I'm a point of light, I am the essence. And when I was about 18, I was sent home from hospital after a major operation, and I couldn't recover from it. So they said to my parents, it's better that she goes home and she dies at home. And so that's what I did. I left. And it was such an extraordinary experience of just being at one with my own consciousness in light, and viewing my body from a distance, fascinated by this shell, this thing that I had called me. And I remember being out of the body and feeling so at one with myself. And I remember one very clear thought I had was, why do we complicate everything so much? And it was always a quest for me to try, and when I came back into the body for various reasons, because my mother wouldn't let me go, and the karmic connection, the energy between us pulled me back. But for the continuing journey of my life, I was trying to understand why we complicate everything. Where has simplicity gone? And so a lot of this was I found the knowledge and the form of meditation, very simple, and it satisfied a deep search within me. I mean, it was the beginning of a new search. It's not like, oh, well, I've come home. It was the beginning of a new search, and every day, every year, my life has been one long unfolding of understanding and humbly accepting what I don't know and what I don't understand. So meeting the Brahma Kumaris really enriched that part of me, and then it was able to be fed back into my work, because I believe that the actor is a representation of the human spirit, which is manifest in the human doing and actions, but it has its source. If we don't connect with the source, then what we produce in this material physical world it's lacking in substance somehow.
So you had this lovely kind of symbiotic relationship between your acting and what you were putting into that, bringing joy and happiness through your performances and feeding that then back into your meditation. But then came this inquiry into conflict resolution, which led to you studying it at university at a master's level. What do you think led you to be interested in that area?
I just never understood why we hurt each other, why we deliberately go out to hurt, sometimes the one we love most, or the ones that that have nurtured us or cared for us. Suddenly something snaps, and even in war, brothers fighting brothers and families fighting families, and they've got stories. So again, the stories have to be honoured and respected. But I wanted to know more, and I needed to understand this, the whole human aspect of fighting, hurting, and conflict. And so I needed to learn how to bring peace into the room in a very different way. And again, it's always a journey to learn. I think learn about myself. I think my life is a journey back home to myself, and study is one of the greatest opportunities for inquiry and going out there into the world and rebalancing it with some peace, with some non-violence, and our capacity as human beings is so great. We function sometimes on such a low capacity, and it's not our natural state.
So you were working kind of consciously with people who were experiencing, perhaps their shadow aspect, people who were experiencing negative emotions through their anger or whatever. What did you find was the most effective, or what do you find is the most effective way of entering into that person's world, as you're saying, and walking in their shoes, and expanding that worldview to incorporate a more loving perspective? How do you make that change come about?
No matter who the person is, or the persons are, or the organisation is, or the team, there's always an underlying fear. And the need to belong is so great in us for our survival. So the underlying fear is often survival and winning. And so when I understand that element of fear is overriding all things, which then creates the hatred that we talked about, or anger, it brings up a whole lot of other relatives there, or like cousins that come rushing in to support that emotion. But the underlying aspect of fear. And because it's so contagious, I would find that when I was in a room, in particular, I suppose, with mediation, I could easily pick up their fear and their negative emotions. But sometimes when we think back, some of the greatest mediators and natural ones have been our grandparents, or our lovely parents that are loving, that love us, that understand we're suffering, or we're hurting each other, or we're fighting, or we're in pain, we're fearful. Just their love, their kindness. I think kindness and love and generosity, these are natural spiritual laws, they're natural spiritual qualities that we all have. It's not like some have it and some don't. We all have it. It's just how it's accessed, when it's accessed. And so I found that as a mediator in the room, it's a bit of the love and the law. You can't be all loving. You also, sometimes love is expressed through being very strong and very guiding and very, God's love can sometimes be very, very strong. You know, some of the old daddies that I grew up with, some of the old yogis, they loved us so much, and there was so much love in their eyes, but they would really sort of come down very firmly in order to keep us on track and of our journey back home to the self and our spiritual path. So I found it when I had the frequency, I raised the frequency in the room as a mediator or a conflict resolutionist, when I could raise the frequency through my own consciousness. And it takes practice when I'm in my personal time. It doesn't just happen. It takes conscious practice, and intention is very, very important. So when I raised my frequency and my consciousness with a kindness to inquire and understand what's going on here, and how can I help, and how can we appease this and heal and nurture this relationship. It's amazing the shift that takes place. People sort of calm. They tap into a higher place in themselves as well. It's quite extraordinary. It's like alchemy. It just turns from that darkness into light.
It's very interesting hearing you speaking, because there's clearly a thread from being a small child and standing behind the shutter and watching and tracking people's emotional states, to then studying that in the characters that you were playing and thinking about what they would be thinking and feeling and portraying that, to then in your conflict resolution, you're doing the same thing. In a way, you're observing people and seeing the place that they're coming from and really trying to represent that as best you can and understand that. Would you say, though, in your life that you have had times when you have genuinely experienced fear yourself?
Yeah, fear and terror. I think terror is the older sibling to fear, and fear is easier to manage. Fear, you can put the pause button on and make a choice. Okay, what's going on here? I think terror can actually freeze you at the fight or freeze kind of part of the brain that just goes, oh no. So I remember when I first went to Sydney to study at drama school, and I was quite young, like late teens, and first time away from home, quite inexperienced with life. And I was asleep in my bed one night and woke up because I couldn't breathe, and there was this great big hand over my face. And I couldn't move. The hand was so strong and trying to suffocate me. And I probably had just 1 ounce of life and breath left in me. And I bit this person so hard that I apparently kind of maybe bit through their bone. But they took off. And I remember this shadow disappearing through the bedroom door as they ran into the night. And in that second, it was a split second, and I'm so grateful I made this choice in that split second, was that you are not going to ruin my life. You are a coward and you don't deserve to ruin my life. And that pact I made with myself, even though I suffered afterwards, I was traumatized, I was unsure, it gave me the courage to continue journeying through my life, because I made that decision in that moment, that someone who was of a lesser capacity, a lesser consciousness, was not going to spoil my life, that my life would be influenced and changed by great people, by people that had a much higher intention, that I would look for those people to affect me and change me, not the bullies and the cowards that come in the night to steal parts of you, like fear does. And whereas the girl that I was living with at that time, she never recovered from it. She lived in so much fear. She could never live alone. She became a very nervous, very unstable because of that experience. It happened to me, she reacted in that way, and it was a choice. I think it's held me in good stead in many fearful times in my life. I think, no, come on, Chrissy, let's rise above this. And
did it set you up with a fear of being in the dark and imagining that things could happen?
Well, yeah, the imagination is a very powerful thing. The imagination can be a wonderful tool to uplift us into possibilities and greatness. We can imagine what's possible, but the imagination can also take you into the terror or the fear of, well, what happens if this happens, and what's going to happen here? And so I remember waking in the night once when I was living on my own, and waking in the night and hearing a sound, and it sounded like someone was in the house, and the fear just gripped me. I broke out in a sweat that, the hair all on the back of my neck stood up. It was just terrifying. And I thought, no, I am not going to be belittled. I'm not going to be made small by this emotion, this fear. And even if I'm going to be killed, then I'll be killed getting out there and, and facing it head on rather than cowering in the corner. So I got up and I turned all the lights on. I checked behind doors. I checked everywhere. There was nothing. There was nothing. No one was there. It was just this lingering fear that was always in the back of my consciousness, the what ifs. And when I practiced courage, the more I practiced courage, the more it grew. So through my life, I've become quite courageous. I shock myself sometimes, because I've got much more courage because I've practiced it. Whereas otherwise I'd become small, and I don't want my life to become small. As I get older and older, I want to expand and grow and be an inspiration to the generations that are coming. And,
You're talking about the fear of what you imagined. And I think for many of us, our fears lie in the realm of, imagination, what if, fear of failure, fear of not being accepted, fear of not belonging, fear of getting it wrong. Sort of misplaced fear can really take a hold of us. But the other thing I like about your story is that, you were in darkness and your instinct was to look for the light, to switch the lights on, and that there's something about light that dispels fear. Could you say something more about that?
Yes, light is the secret, finding the light. And when we're talking about my beginning to meditate and doing Raj Yoga, that's where I felt the light. It was an extraordinary experience for me in meditation, was just to feel completely filled with light, like radiant light. And my consciousness was also going, wow, this is extraordinary. And I think light guides us. Like stories are filled with it, lighthouses that guide ships through storms. But I think divine light is the highest light. And that divine light is also us. It's who we are. It's who we are naturally. And so when we go into the darkness, it feels unnatural and it feels like being lost. So it's that divine light, that divine presence that emanates and radiates light, because in light there's a clarity and an understanding of all things. And in darkness then there's fear and there's confusion. And so in meditation for me, it's really connecting to that frequency of God. For me, it's a name, but that divine presence is a very high frequency, and light is also of a very high frequency. And I am ultimately, like when I left the body that time, I was just light. I was in light. The body was a completely separate entity to me. And so, I always look for that divine presence in myself, my higher consciousness, the deep wisdom that lies within that consciousness that emanates light. And Yeah, I always feel like I've got bookends in my life. I have God or the divine presence on one side that takes my hand when I'm fearful, and on the other hand is my higher consciousness that takes my other hand. And the small child in me that becomes fearful feels like I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm protected. And the light becomes almost like an infusion, or a transfusion, you get a blood transfusion, you get a transfusion of light. But we have to take the time out to connect with that. Really turn the light on, flick the switch, charge the battery. So, yeah.
It is interesting if you're walking out into the darkness, what a difference it makes to have a torch with you, or to be carrying a lantern. It somehow makes you feel like the presence of the light will protect you. It's a natural instinct to go towards the light for safety and protection. And I remember you had a friend once who fell overboard from a ship and used the light to save herself. Can you share that story with us?
She was a dancer with the Sydney Dance Company, and they were having a party out on the Sydney Harbour on a sort of a cruise boat. And she was talking to some friends and leant against the railing, and it gave way, and she tumbled over into the dark water. And I remember her telling me about it. She said it was absolutely terrifying because she didn't know what was up and what was down. So she was swimming, and she didn't know if she was swimming down deeper or whether she was where she was in this just darkness all around her in this water. Terrified of what else is in the water as well. Are there any other, predators in the water? And I remember her saying she had this jacket on, and so she had to take the jacket off in the water so that she felt lighter and she could be more buoyant in the darkness. So she was really literally throwing off that burden of the jacket. And then when she did that, she saw this light piercing the surface of the water, and it was the moon. And the moonlight was coming through the water, and she said, and I swam towards the moonlight, and suddenly she surfaced with this gasp of breath, and the boat had been looking for her, and then they found her. And then they shone their light across the water to try and see where she was, and then she surfaced, and the light picked her up as well. But she said the moonlight coming through the surface was what saved her, because she didn't know where she was in the dark.
It's a brilliant analogy, because for me what that represents, that story, is that, no matter where you are, no matter how dark it is, to look for the light within that situation, and the light will always be there, and to move towards the light. Because if we're going to release our fears, which are very real, they're all consuming, they grip us, they hold us in a place of negativity. It's very hard to get free from that feeling. But we need an emotion that is equally as strong as fear. And the emotion of love that comes with light, so love and light, is what can pull us out of that. And so to look for the light practically will enable us to move from one state to another. Would you agree with that?
Well, we talk about the light of love, don't we? When we're in love, it's like we're filled with light. We become radiant. People say, "Oh, you look so beautiful, you're so happy." So it becomes a radiance that other people can feel. But love is such a, we're talking about frequency and vibration. Love is such the essence of who we are. The essence of that divine presence, or God, is love. That's why we're all looking for it. We're all looking for love because we have lost that connection with the self and with God, or that divine presence. We've lost the connection. So love and loving fear and loving the worry, or loving the challenges we're going through, as in like being kind and tender with that feeling that I've had, rather than sometimes we think, oh, I have to get over this fear. Oh, I have to read some books. I have to find a way to stop it. But it's actually being kind and tender with the feeling that I have, or the feeling that someone I love is having, rather than trying to stop it now. When a child is fearful and they're crying, you don't say, stop it and get over that. You put your arms around them and you love them, and then finally they calm down because of that feeling of being safe, of being in the presence of that unconditional love. And so it's choosing to acknowledge that the fear is there. I don't really think we can pretend that, it's just going to go away, because it is real. And it's one of our base survival, and our need for shelter and money and protection is one of our base needs as a human being. And from that place we can grow and explore life. But if that's not in place, then we become sort of small and shut down. My journey of life was never about getting the house and the security and the shelter all in place. There's Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, which is like a triangle. In my life, it was like the triangle was inverted. I started with a spiritual seeking as a small child, trying to ask questions that helped me understand, trying to observe people to try and understand why they were like they were. But what I'm finding now is that we're all on a precarious level as far as our material stability goes and our identity around that I'm now finding my basis, my stability, the strength of my foundations is one of honouring and respecting all things to do with spirit and the human soul. And I really feel deep humility and gratitude that I have made the choices that I have made in my life. And sometimes I've said to myself, I've made the wrong choices, or I should have been more responsible in this area or that area. But it's really like the light, God's hand, divine presence reached out to me, and I had a choice whether to take that or not, because there was plenty of other things luring me. But somehow I trusted enough to go, okay, I'll take it and see what happens. And because that love is so unconditional, that love knows me more than I can imagine for myself. Because I've held that hand, and no matter how much my little boat has rocked in the storm, and how the advice of other people of what you should be or what you should be doing, and what, the mistakes you've made, and the problem with you is, as much as people have tried to sort of say that with a good intention, but to bring me down, I've never let go of the hand of that divine presence. And I'm so grateful to myself and to that presence for not letting me go. Because I think once we make a contract and a pact that no matter how big the storm, how hard the rocks are, how big the fear is, I will always hold on to this light, this presence, this divinity within me and the divinity around me, and look for that, because it's always there.
It's a beautiful place to have reached in your life, to feel that is there and that is supporting you. And really the whole conversation that we've had, I'm feeling the kind of points of connection between the different strands of what we've talked about. Because on the one hand, we've been discussing how really we don't feel safe in the world at this point in time with the coronavirus as it is. We don't feel safe to go out and meet with friends and family, to go into the towns and cities, to do the things we used to do. It doesn't feel safe, and in a way the world itself, with the predictions of global environmental catastrophe, economic catastrophe, we're in a place where we find ourselves not feeling safe, which is a bit like your friend who was in the water. And we talked about reaching out for the light, and that the light will be there. And, we've got the light of the sun, we've got the light of the moon, but then we are also light ourselves. And the divine presence of love that you've been talking about just now is also in the form of light. So making that connection between love and light, and really making that your foundation, that is the place you go to feel safety and security within yourself. very neatly leads us into that conclusion of, love and light being our refuge and our harbour, and that is within you all the time. We are light, and that's one of the teachings of the Brahma Kumaris, that the soul is a point of light.
And a very, very peaceful one. That's our original state. And it's remembering. I think meditation or a spiritual journey isn't about learning or having to, where do I start? It's actually about remembering. It's all in us. Our power, our strength, it's in us. We don't have to try so hard. It's about remembering, and sometimes to remember we need to take a bit of time out and remember things. Sometimes we sit quietly and look at photos and remember, or we listen to music and remember. But sometimes we need to just sit and remember who I am, and the disconnection with the world, the disconnection with we're feeling from our families and friends, and that. I think the greatest challenge is the disconnection from the self. That when there's that connection with the self, and I'm comfortable with myself, it's really like the eye of the storm. It's really like my sanctuary. It's the place I return to for stability. I'm never going to find that outside of myself. It's chaotic outside of myself. And if I find that inner stability and that oasis, that, as you said, Philippa, that safe harbour that I return to, and I have to remember to do that because the outside circumstances are very demanding and really want my attention. So I have to put time aside to remember and to reconnect, to reunite with my original self, which is that light, which is the peace, which is my power and my capacity to manage in the face of all challenges. I remember once thinking, I think the greatest loneliness is a separation from self. We can be in a gathering, we can not be socially isolated, we can still be partying and dancing and clubbing and, being with lots of people, but feel incredibly lonely and misunderstood or separate. But I think when we have that connection to self, then, and that love, that ancient love for the self that exists there, when we connect with that, then we can be in any environment. We're not vulnerable to circumstances.
I think we've reached a place where it would be lovely to have an experience of this sense of connecting with ourselves, connecting with the light of who we are. And that feeling that you talked about of placing your hand in the hand of God and feeling that protection and that love from the love of God. If you could lead us into an experience of that with your own meditation, then we can really experience what we've been talking about. That would be great.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Philippa. Thank you. I think we are all on a journey to the wisdom of uncertainty, the wisdom that lies within uncertainty. So we're in it together. My breath is my rhythm of life. Gentle in and out of my breath brings life in every second. When I'm feeling fear, disturbance, my breath becomes short, erratic, to connect to the calm, the original peace that lies deep within me. I swim into that sacred place on the calm and gentle rhythm of my breath. As it slows down, nurtures me, eases me like warm water flowing through my being. I'm breathing in light, breathing out peace into the world, the light, the gentle light of peace and hope. I breathe in light, flowing into the very source of my being. Igniting the small flame of who I am. Breathing in the oxygen of love, fans that small flame. As it expands into courage, hope, beautiful possibilities that I can nurture in my heart. The small flame inside my being grows larger and more radiant with the oxygen of love that I am fanning it with. And that love moves through me like the rays of the sun. Warming, enhancing every part of my being, as if I am growing larger and more beautiful and radiant, like the sun. And the rays emanating from my being merge with the rays of the divine light, the divine presence that holds me, uplifts me, and carries me higher. So the light of this love that emanates from every corner of my being fills humanity, this world, all living creatures with love, hope, and a divine beauty that raises them higher and higher into a place of calm, tranquility, and strength that allows me to journey forward into all things that cross my path. I am safe. I am loved. I am love. And love is the greatest strength of all. Nothing can harm me. Love would continue to expand and guide me. The light of love will shine into the darkness and dissipate all illusion. It is a place I can always return to in myself. It is me. It is mine. It's where I belong, where I live, and where I return to. Om Shanti. Shanti. Shanti.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. I don't know that we necessarily started out in a place of fear, but we definitely ended up in a place of love. And that message that we are love is one that we can really take with us from today's masterclass, along with the idea that no matter the fear that we're experiencing or we're observing in the world around us, that we keep moving towards that light and that we'll find that light inside of ourselves. Thank you, Chrissy, so much.
Thank you. It's lovely to be with you. Om Shanti. Bye-bye. Namaste.
Thank you, Chrissy. And thank you as well to you for joining us from where you are and adding your energy of love into this experience that we've had today. I hope you carry that with you as you journey from here. I hope you'll join us again for tomorrow's masterclass. Until then, keep safe, keep in the love. Om Shanti and goodbye. 21 masterclasses in new consciousness, new ways of thinking, being and doing for the new you. Pioneering thinkers from countries right around the world.